the day, did I forget something? No? Okay. I apologize for forgetting the offering. I got marked down on that in seminary. It was my liturgy class, and I had written out everything, and I was so careful, the prayers, the readings, whatever. And I was sure I was going to get like 100% on this, and I got it back and said, well, you'll just get marked down a little bit from me for the error you made, but do know that you will not be appreciated by most congregations if you keep forgetting the offering. So, my apologies. I woke up the day after the election wondering what new and untraversed fields I would need to navigate. In a 24-hour span of time, the world suddenly seemed very different, and the landscape before me did not allow for any long-distance sight that might enable me to be prepared for now what, or what next. I had no idea in which direction I would be called to take my next step. I had spent every day of the 2 weeks prior to Election Day working in Florida as a nonpartisan voter protection monitor. I had made a point of stopping to listen to the fears and desires of all campaigners. Some of those fears were expressed quietly, some rather loud and brutally. Some were deeply personal, and others were propaganda-inspired. Now, the election process itself was an affirmation of how our system of democracy can work. Voters freely and openly exercised their right to vote. The rule of law was respected, and people had the freedom to demonstrate. It was also an election that showed in hard numbers how divided we are as a nation and how uncomfortable we are talking to each other. The city of St. Petersburg, Florida, was eerily quiet, truly eerily quiet that Wednesday morning. And I couldn't help but wonder if everyone was a bit stunned and not quite certain as to what happens next. As I sat sipping coffee and pondering the election results, I was keenly aware that in almost equal numbers, there were people releasing a bit of their fear, and others for whom the fear was maybe even increasing somewhat. Neither group had time to process what had happened before the pundits were back at their prediction of how, why, and who was to blame. And in the midst of all their guessing, and both Adam Grant and Jon Stewart reminded me of this, in the midst of all their guessing, no one could make an accurate prediction. No one really knew. It was simply that, guessing. And so in the midst of all of that back and forth guessing, I found myself reaching for Trevor's book, Into the Uncut Grass. Sometimes it is only the words of story and poetry that give me the courage not to climb back into bed and hide under the covers. In the midst of the pundits' barrage of new predictions and fears, I felt increasingly lost, confused, uncertain, and unprepared. It is not, as I'm sure many of you are aware, it is not a comfortable place to be. All those media words didn't give me a single clue as to which way to go, how to recoup, and how to begin to heal. And if we are to be honest with ourselves, there is a lot of healing that needs to be done. From the deeply personal in some of what many of you shared this morning to the widely national, fear is a deep wounder. It was Trevor's story of a little boy and his bear that gave me the hope to say, okay, here I go, into the uncut grass. Here I go into the unknown, and even for just one moment at a time, I'm going to trust that I will not be alone for long. I'm going to trust that many of you are already coming with me. The image of finding oneself in the uncut grass or the unmown field is commonly used in stories and fairy tales to depict a state of disorientation, a state of a befuddled what now, a deep uncertainty. Sometimes, as with Trevor's story, we choose to walk into the uncut grass in search of a better way or a deeper understanding. Sometimes, as in the movie Willow, 1988 fantasy adventure, anybody see it? Oh my gosh, you're all gonna go home and watch that tonight. Willow, 1988 fantasy adventure, George Lucas. Our family's probably watched it 50 times. My grown-up kids still quote it. Anyway, okay. In the movie Willow, Willow enters the uncut grass for the protection it offers and soon realizes that he can't stay hidden forever. Somehow, he must find a way through and find a way to trust the very people he never thought he would ever trust with the life of the precious girl child he has committed to protecting. Other images in movies, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Do I have a few more hands for that one? We find ourselves suddenly thrust into the uncut grass and can quickly fall into despair at our predicament. We might fight it, judge it, deny it, but there we are in the midst of it. I am grateful for this familiar image of being in the uncut grass, if for no other reason that it gives me hope that we, if the stories are to be trusted, do not remain stuck in the grass forever. For in every single story that uses the image of uncut grass, a way through is found, and in the process, something is learned, new relationships are built, often with the most unlikely of folk, and something deep is healed. So if you, perhaps like me, are feeling that you are suddenly standing in a field of uncut grass, a national field of uncut grass, that leaves you wondering how to best meet and participate in the current moment, I have a few suggestions that you might find both helpful and hopeful. A few practices that I try to live out even just a little bit every day for my own healing and the healing of our community. So number one, okay, I have three. Number one, don't leave the field. Stay there and don't isolate. Practice living with uncertainty and confusion. Befriend it even. Talk to it, but let it be. No matter how disturbing or disorienting it may feel, stretch your willingness to trust that you are exactly where you need to be at this moment in time. In every story that uses the image of wandering through uncut grass, no one up and leaves without having learned something new or built a new relationship. And so it seems to me that this time of wandering in uncertainty is essential to discovering something new about ourselves and each other. It is a time given to heal not only our grief, but the illusions we had been carrying with us. It is a time to listen, to recalculate, and recalibrate. Don't leave the field and don't isolate from those you encounter on the way. Stretch your willingness to trust who you meet. Take time to listen to them and to listen deeply without jumping to conclusions. For the little boy in Trevor's story, it was listening to snails and a garden gnome who offered new ways of navigating in the world. For Willow, it was trusting a stranger with the safety of the precious girl he had promised to protect. And in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, it meant staying together despite their initial mistrust and dislike of each other. In all three cases, and in many more, no one up and leaves and no one isolates. Everyone pauses to listen, and everyone ends up surprised and enriched. There is wisdom in that process. Stay together and befriend the uncertainty. Number two, in the midst of all that we are feeling, anxiety, disorientation, confusion, fear, and fear may be the unusual common ground we all share. We often say, what's our common ground? What's our common ground? Fear may be that common ground. In the midst of all we are feeling, remind yourself to notice the beauty around you, to notice the kindness of others, to be the one who is kind to another. Notice these things and allow the gratitude to rise within you. Even if you can manage this practice for only 1% of the time you are wandering around in confusion, pay attention. Pay attention to what might bring a smile, a helping hand, a shared bite of food. Give thanks for the roses blooming in November. Margaret had gorgeous roses on her table, and I had a branch of roses this morning that had just burst into bloom. Notice and give thanks. Look up at the stars and the moon when it's at its darkest, and do your best, expend some of your energy to meet even a single moment in the day with gratitude. Gratitude is essential to healing. A story from Gaza. In the midst of the incessant bombing, shattering, and deprivation of Gaza, Mohammed Saeed Halimi, a university student before the war, started filming himself, making short videos of him and his friends doing whatever small thing they could do that felt normal. They filmed the delight of finding an extra 2x4 to strengthen the tent roof, or half a bucket of water that would enable them to wash a shirt. They filmed themselves when they had found a Monopoly game and were able to play together. They filmed themselves walking along the beach at sunset. Saeed's short videos went viral globally, 186,000 views. And then something odd happened. Some people began to question if things were really as bad in Gaza as the media were reporting. Oh, you're playing Monopoly. You walk on the beach. Is the media not showing us the truth? Saeed quickly responded. I created and shared those videos to remind myself and to show everyone the power of resilience. I created those videos to demonstrate our determination to seek out joy and beauty in the midst of devastation. It can still be found. I made those videos to share with you that sometimes even for only 1% of our days, we notice something beautiful. We capture it on film. That is what keeps us living. We cannot wait for uncertainty to clear up or for a path to appear. Each of us must respond to the question, in the midst of all the uncertainty I am feeling, how am I being called to meet this moment that I am given right now with care and compassion, with beauty and gratitude? And number 3, last one. Fear is real and it can protect us as well as harm us. Fear, that stove is hot, I'm not going to touch it, can protect us, and it can terribly harm and wound us. And so, my friends, refrain from cultivating stories of fear. The world does not need another horror story. There's plenty of them out there. And in reality, our vision is limited. So stories of fear are not helpful in these moments. If we didn't realize that reality of our limited vision before finding ourselves in the uncut grass, we now know it for a fact. Our vision is very limited. We cannot predict, we can only promote healing, care, and gratitude for the moment at hand. Learning to befriend uncertainty enables us to move forward with less reactivity and greater responsiveness to what we discover. Be curious about those snails you observe in the uncut grass rather than judging what you observe. Be creative with your language. Try using resist rather than fight, or resistance as the process you want to engage. Try collaborating instead of taking charge, or switching from pondering blame to pondering next steps. Practice asking questions rather than assuming knowledge. That's a hard one. Many of us are very good at that, and I'm number one. It's such a comfort to assume knowledge, to assume that we know. But practice asking questions rather than assuming knowledge. Ask the questions, and then do not demand of them an immediate answer. Allow the question itself to be the only thing needed. Allow the question itself to be part of the healing process. So these three practices: don't isolate, stretch your willingness to trust those you meet along the way, do not leave the uncut grass immediately, take the time to meet the snails and the gnomes, consider engaging the entire experience with your curiosity. 2, be ever present to the beauty around you. Note it in people, in nature, in humor, and express gratitude for its presence. Be present to the beauty others might bring. Be present. And 3, refrain from creating, sharing, continuing horror stories. Recognize that our vision is limited. Ask questions of good faith. Build resistance, build resilience, and resist when fear and despair threaten. These 3 practices are, I believe, the very source of our healing and must be engaged with intention. As we heal, and I trust that we will, slowly, but we will discover among us a new resilience. We will discover a working relationship with many others, and we will emerge from the uncut grass together, carrying with us all of the wisdom such a journey bestows on those who engage the challenge. May it be so.